In the face of discrimination, injustice, sexism, and racism, Dorothy I. Height, the godmother of the civil rights movement, was ever present in her signature hats and elegant attire. Dr. Height's 80-year-long stand for civil rights and social justice has, however, often been erased, ignored, or discounted. At her funeral, President Obama called her
a drum major for equality, a drum major for freedom, a drum major for service.
Dr. Dorothy Irene Height was born on March 24, 1912, in Richmond, Virginia, to parents Fanny and James Height. Dorothy often described her upbringing as one filled with love, surrounded by 4 siblings. At the age of 4, her family moved to Rankin, Pennsylvania during the Great Migration. During her youth, Dorothy faced injustice, but one instance significantly shaped her life. Initially, she was accepted at New York's Barnard College, but the offer was revoked because the school had met their Negro quota. Undaunted, a cousin took Dorothy to New York University, where she was accepted on the spot. As a student, Height experienced a wide variety of opportunities.
We learned how to protest nonviolently.
One of the most pivotal events during her college experience was her pledging Delta Sigma Theta. Membership in the sorority for Black women specifically led Dorothy towards a career as a social worker. In 1930, she graduated with her bachelor's degree and 2 years later earned her master's degree from Columbia University. Dorothy rapidly established an outstanding reputation as a social worker with the New York Welfare Department. As a result, she was called upon to help mediate racial tensions during the intensely confrontational 1935 Harlem riots. Miss Height's effectiveness during this crisis earned a leadership role within the New Deal's National Youth Administration. During the summer of 1937, Miss Height was chosen to attend an international conference at Oxford University. Upon her return, Dorothy was hired as the assistant to the executive director of the West 137th Street YWCA. Immediately, Miss Height was beset with requests from Black women for access to the same programs and fundings as the country's other branches of the YWCA. Dorothy responded with action through this branch and the Harlem branch. Thousands of Black women and girls received access to jobs and housing. Dorothy's valiant efforts captured the attention of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, founder of the National Council of Negro Women. Dr. Bethune invited Dorothy to join her leadership team. Eventually, Dr. Bethune became a second mother and mentor to her as they worked side by side with the National Youth Administration. Association with Dr. Bethune brought Dorothy into close contact with Eleanor Roosevelt. As Mrs. Roosevelt's frequent companion, she was able to share African American women's issues with the First Lady. Together, they were able to sponsor community forums and locate resources for marginalized people. In April of 1939, however, Dorothy's mother died. Afterward, she was anxious to leave New York. She was offered an executive-level position at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA in Washington, D.C., as the organization's youngest sitting executive. After recovering from a near-fatal car accident, Dorothy was energized to address a major disparity in the quality of programs created specifically for women of color. Dorothy recognized how divisive it was for the YWCA to have separate organizations based upon race. In 1944, the YWCA affirmed the inclusion of Negro women and girls in the mainstream of association life as a conscious goal, a public stand against segregation. Officially integrating the YWCA was a noble endeavor, but much more difficult to implement. White members didn't want to associate with Black members, and Black members were generally suspect of white members. These perceptions ran even deeper throughout the South. Dorothy Height took action, traveling nationwide, networking with other key organizations to identify common ground among all women, regardless of color. In 1946, the YWCA officially integrated. Miss Height's stance against segregation was gaining traction, yet changed laws didn't alter people's behaviors. Dorothy resolved that it was her responsibility to also confront discrimination in all federally funded service organizations. She began with writing personal letters to congressional leadership to support establishing the Fair Employment Practices Commission. Because of her national visibility, Dorothy was nominated for Vice President of Delta Sigma Theta. 3 years later, she became the organization's president and served in that capacity for the next 9 years. President Haidt described her goal for Delta Sigma Theta as a stand for equitable exposure of Negro women to job opportunities.
I feel it was, you never can tell me what I can't do or what I won't do or what I shouldn't do because I'm going to create my own path.
In 1957, Dorothy became the 4th president of the National Council of Negro Women. This era was pivotal as the group was drawn into the growing civil rights movement. Having known Dr. King since his adolescence, Dr. Haidt became heavily immersed in advancing the 1963 Civil Rights March, responsible for organizing and recruiting participants. Despite their essential role in the march, the NCNW was given minimal credit.
The marches were predominantly women and youth and children.
Dr. Haidt recognized that the council needed its own platforms to forward the well-being of Black women. Still active with the YWCA, Dorothy helped establish the Office of Racial Justice in 1965 and remained its head for 12 years. Strides were made, but by the end of 1977, Dr. Haidt focused her stands for civil rights through the NCNW. For the next 30 years, Dorothy served as the council's president. She was an able fundraiser, purchasing a historic building on Pennsylvania Avenue as the national headquarters. Haidt fueled the group's tenacious civil rights advocacy, introducing programs including Black Family Reunion.
Instead of protesting all the negatives about the Black family, we at the National Council of Negro Women set out to do something positive.
And in 1964, Wednesdays in Mississippi. This interracial and interfaith organization brought together voices that often did not hear each other.
They had to agree that they would go back home and work on civil rights in their own communities.
Dr. Haidt's sophisticated and polite demeanor were in contrast to more radical activists of the time. Yet, Dr. Haidt's stands for social and economic justice were rarely noticed by the media. As she said, if you worry about who is going to get the credit, not much will get done.
You didn't really see her because that was at a time when women were not in the forefront. But we all know who was the catalyst behind the change that takes place.
Regardless, Dr. Dorothy Haidt was invited to every president's White House, from FDR to Obama. Ever distinguishable in her signature hats, Dr. Haidt was both a witness to and officially photographed at the signing of nearly every piece of significant civil rights legislation. As a result, her stand for and voice on behalf of the disadvantaged reached the highest levels. Dr. Haidt's lifelong stand for equality and opportunity for all peoples earned her our nation's highest recognition. Dorothy also authored 2 books, Open Wide the Freedom Gates in 2003 and Living with Purpose in 2010. Throughout her lifetime, she received over 36 honorary degrees and doctorates, but in 2004 she was given an honorary bachelor's degree from Barnard College, 75 years after being turned away. The godmother of the civil rights movement, persistent champion for equal opportunity, died of natural causes on April 20th, 2010 in Washington, D.C. President Obama delivered Dr. Haidt's eulogy at her National Cathedral funeral. Dr. Haidt described her motivation for living her life with a purpose.
Doing it not for myself, but for others. Not by myself, but with others, and for the betterment of us all.
She rejected the status quo, entrenched stagnation, because she believed that everyone, regardless of race, gender, ability, or background, could take a stand to lift others. Dr. Dorothy I. Haidt, the hurricane under a hat, a catalyst for change, was able to take a stand for civil rights and justice with a certain grace and style that forever changed the face of public service.
We should never forget what the struggle has been. And we should also recognize the progress that we've made. One day